The premise is simple. 16 total strangers are dropped off in the middle of nowhere with only the most rudimentary supplies, usually a knife, a pot or pan for boiling water, enough rice for 1 or 2 meals, and a flint for starting a fire. They must start from scratch and build shelter, find a fresh water supply, or at least build a fire to boil water and protect themselves from wildlife. More important, they must build some type of society and establish some rules for living, because for the next 39 days their survival depends on one another. Cooperation is paramount. Teamwork is essential. And by the way, they are competing against each other for a grand prize of $1 million that will be awarded to the sole survivor. The so-called reality television show Survivor has enjoyed several successful seasons as one of the most popular and highest-rated programs shown around the world. Viewers are vicariously transported to exotic locations such as Palau Tiger Island, the outback of Australia, and the tropical rainforest of the Amazon. Contestants range from 20-something bikini-clad swimsuit models and bare-chested personal fitness trainers to 50-something grandmothers, ex-professional football players, and goat farmers. Survival skills are tested as participants build shelter, forage for food, and compete in reward challenges involving athletic and mental contests and immunity challenges to avoid getting voted out of the tribe. Each season has pitted young against old, blacks against whites and other racial and ethnic groups, men against women, blue-collar workers against professionals, devout Christians against atheists, and one season even featured a hearing-impaired contestant. First they compete in teams, later it becomes an individual competition. At first it seems that the fittest will survive, so young, athletic, muscular ex-military types seem to have a clear advantage over weaker, less physically gifted opponents. Yet, both contestants and viewers soon realize that survival skills involve far more than youth, vigor, and physical fitness. In each episode, alliances are made and broken, rumors run rampant, hunting, fishing, and cooking skills become less important than diplomacy and the ability to fly under the radar to avoid making enemies. In the end, various survivor millionaires have included the most obnoxious and hated tribal member, Richard from Season 1, one of the most popular and friendly tribal members, Tina from Season 2, and a self-confessed spoiled brat in a 22-year-old swimsuit model, Jenna from Season 6. In fact, most viewers, contestants, and winners agree that each season's sole survivor has been totally unpredictable. You may ask, what does the television program Survivor have to do with sociology? At first, the answer seems to be nothing, yet if one looks beneath the surface of the mere voyeuristic and entertainment aspects of the program, the answer is, more accurately, everything. While reality television may be far removed from most people's reality, the program underscores what sociologists have always known. Age, race, ethnicity, sex, gender, social class, religion, groups, and social networks are but a few of the important variables that affect how people interact and literally survive in the real world. More important, each season and every episode of Survivor has illustrated the first wisdom of sociology and the guiding theme of this book. Things are not necessarily what they seem. Berger, 1963. What is sociology? Sociology is the systematic and scientific study of human behavior, social groups, and society. Sociologists examine the structural and institutional forces that shape our everyday lives, behaviors, and social values, and look at how we help create those social structures and institutions. Table 1.1 compares and contrasts sociology to other social and behavioral sciences and related disciplines. Sociology is an academic discipline, but this does not mean that it is simply a thing to be studied. Sociology is first of all a thing lived. Perhaps sociologist Peter Berger said it best when he wrote, "Sociology is not a practice, but an attempt to understand." This requires that sociologists look at everyday events a little differently from the way most people do. Our goal in this book is to help you better understand the world in which you live and your place in it by helping you to develop your sociological imagination and to learn to think sociologically. Do you sometimes enjoy the peace and solitude of being alone? At other times, do you like being with other people, celebrating your achievements or sharing your concerns? If you are like most people, the answer to both questions is probably yes. While all of us enjoy some time alone, we also need and actively seek the company and security of other people. We congregate to establish families, groups, tribes, communities, nations, and many other organizations, some of which transcend national boundaries. This social imperative sets us apart from other animals, and, though it is survival-related, it greatly transcends mere biological or instinctive drives to cluster for survival. As we form collectivities, we make both conscious and unconscious choices to sacrifice some of our individual freedoms, but at the same time we derive many social benefits from the process. This interdependence between society and the individual is the primary focus of sociology, and understanding it requires the development of a sociological imagination, a quality of mind that provides an understanding of ourselves within the context of the larger society. Mills, 1959. Focus Box 1.1 describes how one of the authors had his sociological imagination sparked and became a sociologist. The sociological imagination. By using our sociological imaginations, we can better see the relationship between ourselves and the society in which we live. Sociologist C. Wright Mills, 1959, contended that this requires that we grasp the connection between history, events that have shaped an entire society's values and beliefs, and biography, an individual's life experiences within a particular society. This important link is often overlooked, but it is essential for sociological understanding because it places individual behavior in a larger social context. It reminds us that we, as individuals, are to some extent products of the particular society and historical period in which we live, but also acknowledges that we are history makers who help produce and change society by our actions. We can only guess what would have happened to the civil rights movement of the 1960s if the late Rosa Parks had given up her seat to the white man and moved to the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, or what might have transpired if she had refused to do so 30 years earlier in the 1920s. Sociology teaches us that everything from the most heroic and spectacular actions to the most mundane and taken-for-granted features of our existence reflects the dynamic interplay between the individual and society. Personal troubles versus social issues. A sociological imagination allows us to see the important relationship between personal troubles, which affect an individual, e.g. being an alcoholic, and social issues, which reflect a problem for the entire society, e.g. alcoholism. Mills, 1959. This distinction is a critical component of sociology because it enables us to see the general in the particular. Berger, 1963. Sociologists study patterns of behavior in order to draw general conclusions about a social issue that transcend the effect of the problem or issue on any particular individual. For example, while alcoholism may have devastating consequences for the alcoholic and his or her immediate family, sociology focuses on the larger problem of alcoholism and its impact on society. This broader sociological focus may include cross-cultural values and attitudes toward alcohol consumption, alcohol use and abuse on college campuses, drinking and driving, the differences and similarities between alcoholism and other forms of drug abuse, and other sociological issues. This is not to say that sociologists are unconcerned about individuals and their lives, but sociology's emphasis is on the way individuals relate to others, people's positions in society, and the interdependence between society and individuals. Making generalizations while avoiding stereotypes. As noted in the example of alcoholism, one goal of sociologists is to identify and understand general patterns of social behavior by studying the actions of specific individuals and groups. As a result of sociological studies show that nationality, race, age, gender, sexual orientation, political preference, religion, and a host of other social factors greatly affect our viewpoints and actions. For example, as we discuss in Chapter 16, African Americans, women, the elderly, and labor union members are more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans in national elections. In making generalizations, however, we must be careful not to fall prey to overgeneralizations and inaccurate stereotypes, oversimplified ideas about a group, that can seriously distort our thinking and cloud our understanding. Consider some of the ways we think about and act toward people based on their race, age, sex, social class, and other characteristics, and how these thoughts and actions can be potentially damaging and even dangerous. Many of our stereotypes come from the mass media, especially television. Throughout this book, we illustrate how to examine the media more critically from a sociological perspective. Stereotypes also come from our myopic view of the world. The sociological imagination and locating individuals in a larger social context require that we understand that we live in a global society. Understanding life in a global society. One of the most significant social consequences of the 20th century was the transformation of a world of separate nation-states with unique histories, cultures, and social experiences into a massive global village. In the 16th century, the Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan led a Spanish expedition that was the first to circumnavigate the globe. The treacherous journey took approximately 3 years. Today, ships can make the same journey in less than a week, and airplanes in less than 24 hours. Communication satellites orbit the Earth in less than 2 hours and send electronic signals around the world in seconds. The world has changed, and understanding the nature of these changes is essential. Nowhere is that change more apparent and powerful than in our ability to communicate information, transport people, and move huge sums of capital around the globe quickly. Technological advances in communication, transportation, importation, and exportation have rendered the ideology and policies of social isolationism not only ridiculous but also impossible. As one sociologist noted, globalization changes everything. Some social things may be reshaped or threatened. They can't any longer be taken for granted. Look around you. Two of the most popular brands of Japanese automobiles, Toyota and Honda, are manufactured in Ohio and Kentucky, while many General Motors cars are made from parts manufactured in Mexico and Canada. The best-selling American athletic shoes, Nike, are headquartered in Oregon but made in China and Indonesia. Reebok shoes bear the symbol of the British flag but are manufactured in China and Indonesia. Designer clothes with European labels are made in Central and South America, as are some of the least expensive brands sold under American labels in huge discount stores in the United States. The recognition that we live in a global society is an integral part of thinking sociologically and developing our sociological imaginations, that is, understanding ourselves in a larger social context. Throughout this book, we focus on the global aspects of the issue under study and draw on a wealth of studies and examples from around the world. Global awareness also helps us to question cultural misconceptions and media stereotypes about people who live in countries with cultures very different from our own. It accentuates diversity and helps us challenge views that our particular way of doing things is the only way or even the best way of doing them. Recognizing diversity. Imagine a world where everybody is exactly the same. Everyone looks alike, acts alike, talks alike, and thinks alike. What a simple and uninteresting world it would be. While it may sometimes be comforting to be around people with similar backgrounds and interests, the world is far more complex than that. We live in a world where variety is indeed the spice of life. Globalization has increased mobility, providing in many places a social mosaic of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, nationalities, religions, and cultures. How does this diversity affect you and me? It requires that we look at ourselves and the world in which we live a bit differently. We must realize that complex social issues cannot be viewed in simple terms of right or wrong, black or white, and good or evil, but require that we understand and consider other points of view that maybe be dramatically different from our own. Just as sociology makes generalizations about how common powerful social forces act on all of us, it also recognizes the importance of diversity for understanding social interaction and human society. Throughout this book, we underscore the diversity of society by focusing on research and examples that include people from both sexes, the entire range of gender roles, a wide variety of racial and ethnic groups, diverse sexual orientations, different levels of physical and mental abilities, and representatives from diverse national, cultural, religious, and political affiliations, as well as all social classes. As noted, sociologists are interested in how variables such as age, race, sex, and social class, as well as a host of other social characteristics, influence social interaction and shape the society in which we live. These and other aspects of social diversity are at the heart of the sociological enterprise. As with an understanding of globalization, this appreciation for diversity quashes numerous misconceptions and stereotypes about various categories and groups of people and leads us to question many aspects of social life often taken for granted. Questioning common sense understandings is at the heart of sociology and sociological thinking. Sociology and critical thinking. Thinking sociologically is a form of critical thinking that involves objectively assessing ideas, statements, and information. It entails defining problems, looking beneath the surface of commonly held ideas, questioning assumptions, logically and systematically analyzing evidence, recognizing biases, avoiding emotional knee-jerk reactions to issues and arguments, forming reasonable solutions to problems, and developing tolerance for a certain amount of uncertainty and ambiguity. Ruggiero, 2000. Simply put, sociological thinking involves asking questions and questioning answers. It requires taking a closer look at our social world. Taking a closer look, things are not necessarily what they seem. The subject of sociology is people and what they do in groups, organizations, and societies, subject matter familiar to all of us. Unfortunately, much of our understanding of the social world is very individualized and limited to personal experience, hearsay, and our preconceived notions about the way we think things are and the way we might want them to be. Sociology looks beyond the commonly accepted understandings of human social action to discover different levels of meaning that may be hidden from the consciousness of everyday life. It may even require a bit of suspicion and skepticism about the way human events are interpreted both personally and officially. This sometimes creates a problem for sociologists if they study a commonly experienced social institution such as the family, for example, and find that children tend to adopt the religious and political views of their parents. Many people respond with a resounding "so what, everybody knows that." On the other hand, if sociological findings contradict a commonly held assumption, for example, that child molestation is more likely to be perpetrated by a family member or a close friend of the family than by a stranger, they are likely to be met with skepticism, disbelief, or even anger. As one sociologist noted, applying the sociological imagination may make you a rude, improper guest who crashes someone else's well-planned party. This damned if you do, damned if you don't dilemma is faced by virtually all who undertake the sociological enterprise. The study of sociology does not require that we abandon our values, thoughts, ideas, and accumulated knowledge, but it does necessitate being open-minded and tolerant of values, thoughts, ideas, knowledge, and experiences that may be dramatically different from our own. This allows us to see the strange in the familiar and important aspect of thinking sociologically. This is not to say sociologists are interested only in the bizarre or sensational aspects of human life. Quite the contrary. The sociologist is as interested in the priest as in the thief, in the hero as in the mass murderer, in the executioner as in the death row inmate. But when we study these people and their roles sociologically, that is, systematically and scientifically, we find that many of our preconceived notions are totally inaccurate, and that much of what passes for common sense is nothing more than common nonsense. Sociology differs from everyday observation because it uses systematic scientific methods to obtain information for research and study. Sociological thinking requires looking beneath the surface to question what we think we already know about people and their roles in society. When we do this, more often than not, we find that things are not necessarily what they seem. Analyzing assumptions and challenging personal experiences can be quite unsettling. Sociology often raises more questions than it answers. Those who demand concrete answers and absolute certainties may become frustrated with sociology. Those who enjoy the search for elusive answers to the riddles of social life, however, will find sociology very appealing. Sociological thinking also demands that we look beyond common sense assumptions, media portrayals, and official data to assess critically how such information is reported, collected, and interpreted. Any attempt to think sociologically about contemporary society must include a focus on mass media and the new information technologies, or technomedia. These media not only reflect our society, but also play an important role in shaping and defining it. Now, more than ever, we need the critical thinking skills of sociology to analyze the lies, distortions, and calculated fantasies that have become part of the normal content of mass communication. One sociological study of television talk shows concluded, "Decade of the confrontational contemporary television talk show has provided, if however unintentionally, an ideal laboratory for the study of the social construction of reality." Since it is already well documented that Americans get most of their information from television, it seems that sociology could well use its unique conceptual framework to help the public see through the talk shows and similar media messages. Taking a closer look at the mass media. The critical thinking characteristic of sociology is especially useful in evaluating the mass media because of their profound impact on virtually every aspect of social life. By mass media, we mean forms of communication that transmit standardized messages to widespread audiences, including newspapers, magazines, honks, radio, television, and motion pictures. Communications expert Wilson Dizard, 1997, refers to these as the old media. Combined with the new technomedia, they constitute one of the most powerful social influences in the world. Perhaps the first major technological development in creating a powerful mass media occurred in the mid-19th century when the invention of steam-powered printing presses led to widespread distribution of affordable newspapers, magazines, and books. Literacy rates increased dramatically, news and information traveled much more rapidly and reached much greater audiences, and for the first time, ordinary people turned to reading as a source of information and entertainment. The second significant technological advancement occurred with the introduction of radio broadcasting in 1920 and television in 1939. From 1920 to the early 1950s, the radio was a centerpiece in almost every American home and served as a primary source of news and entertainment. When the Pioneer Corporation introduced television sets to America with the words "We bring the revolution home," many doubted that television could ever replace the popular medium of radio. In 1946, motion picture mogul Darrell F. Zanuck of 20th Century Fox declared that television would never be successful because people would tire of staring at a plywood box every night. Today, almost every American home has at least one television set. The average home has between 2 and 3 sets. See Table 1.2. Studies reveal that children spend as many as 40 hours per week viewing television. Adults are also ardent television viewers. It has been estimated that they spend between 1/4 and 1/3 of their lives in front of a television set. Through the use of satellites and other communication technology, television literally links every portion of the globe into one mass-mediated society. Sociological analysis can help us understand that while society has a tremendous impact on the mass media, the media, especially television, not only reflect the society but also exert tremendous influence in shaping society. The media influence social and political agendas by deciding what tiny bit of a tremendous amount of information is important. Moreover, when people have not experienced an event firsthand, media reports often constitute their first draft of reality. For some, it may also constitute their final draft. It can be argued that mass media, especially television, may in fact be the most powerful social force in American society today, and perhaps in the world, since it now reaches even the most remote areas of the globe. Several key media formats serve to filter what we see, read, and hear. First and foremost, media presentations, including those of serious information like the evening news, must be entertaining to attract viewers. For example, there appears to be little difference between stories aired by the major networks on the nightly news and those shown on popular television programs such as Inside Edition and Extra. Second, information must be packaged and presented within severe time constraints. After the time devoted to commercials, for example, the evening news has 23 minutes to convey the day's most important events. Usually each major story gets 2 minutes or less. Stories that might take more than 3 minutes are considered too long for network news and are more appropriate for documentaries. Thus, if the media act as a mirror, they are a clouded and distorted mirror at best. As a consequence of these and other agendas and formats, media presentations almost always emphasize 1. Personal over social issues, 2. Emotional over intellectual issues, 3. Concrete over abstract events, and 4. Dynamic and fast-paced stories over talking heads and thought-provoking pieces. The media rarely display a sociological imagination. Instead, they personalize issues by using the most sensational, emotional, and extreme examples possible. Although the traditional mass media, especially television, are still among the most powerful and pervasive forms of media today, we are bombarded with new forms of information technology that greatly influence our individual lives and change the world around us. Whereas communication and the exchange of information were once limited to face-to-face interaction or standardized and more structured channels, now we can access a wealth of information and data almost instantaneously and can communicate with people around the globe. We define technomedia as the newer and more personalized information technologies, including personal computers, CD-ROMs, fax machines, video games, handheld data banks, cellular phones, the internet, fiber optic communications, and interactive television, what Dizzard 1997 calls the new media. The technomedia are of particular interest to sociologists because they combine elements of both the old and new media. Time, Newsweek, US News, World Report, the New York Times, Washington Post, and a host of other major magazines and newspapers, as well as the networks ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and CNN, are fully accessible on the World Wide Web. The so-called new media now include all the major players from traditional mass media. Sociologists are interested in technomedia for other reasons as well. Although computers and other electronic media appear to have a unifying effect on society by making communication and social interaction faster and easier than ever before, they also illustrate that things are not necessarily what they seem. The technomedia combine all the aspects of traditional mass media, print, sound, and video, but rather than sending standardized messages to massive audiences, technomedia are interactive and aimed at providing much more personalized services to smaller groups and individuals. Or, as one media expert asserted, television is the primary medium for broadcasting, but the internet is the ultimate in narrowcasting, offering websites and chat groups that appeal to the particular interests of individual users. Thus, while approximately 50 million Americans may use the internet annually, the largest percentage are white men over age 40. Racial and ethnic minorities, women, the elderly, and the poor are the least likely to have access to or to use the new technomedia. In 1998, almost half of all white homes had computers, 44.9%, but less than one-third, 29.0% of African-American households were equipped with computers, a phenomenon dubbed the racial divide on the information highway, or what sociologists refer to as the digital divide. That gap narrowed somewhat a year later as 36% of African Americans gained access to the internet. The fastest growing category of computer and internet users, however, is youth ages 10 through 18. Because of their ease with technology, experts predict that this age group may soon become the major users of all technomedia. In 1949, the magazine Popular Mechanics predicted that sometime in the future computers might weigh as little as 1.5 tons, making them more practical for use in business and industry. Today, most laptop computers are no larger than a purse or small briefcase, and handheld calculators and Palm Pilots are as small and lightweight as a credit card. It took radio 15 years to penetrate 25% of American households. Television did it in only 7 years. The internet took less than 3 years. CBS News, 1999. It is estimated that nearly 70 million households around the world are wired for internet access, 2/3 of that number in the United States and Canada alone. Of greater sociological interest than these figures is the fact that different racial, age, gender, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups have differential access to and use patterns of technomedia. Online chat rooms are so commonplace that they are being replaced with virtual communities. In 1996, for example, Howard Rheingold, a San Francisco-based writer, created a town in cyberspace called Electric Minds. According to its creator, a virtual community goes a step beyond chat rooms by providing more structure, long-term bulletin boards and message centers where messages remain for months at a time, and a place where communities are built on sustained conversations as opposed to more ephemeral chat. These cyberspace communities are emerging at an amazing rate and attract residents from all over the United States, Tokyo, Berlin, and other major cities around the world. Hafner, 1997. Social norms arise in chat rooms and in virtual communities, creating what some have dubbed as cyber civility. Minard, 2000. Not only computers have made their way into the hands of individuals, but also a wide variety of other information technologies, including personal fax machines, cellular telephones, fiber optic communications, and interactive television, which combines aspects of the old media with the new. Unlike the traditional mass media, which were phased into society slowly, new forms of technomedia burst onto the scene almost daily. They have certainly changed people's lives in terms of activities, if not also in substance and content. May 2002. New media technologies permeate every aspect of society and have become embedded in our very social fabric. Howard and Jones, 2004. Moreover, unlike many of the older forms of mass media, much of the new technomedia is relatively unregulated. Today, anybody who secures a website can disseminate research findings and data or express opinions as facts with virtually no checks or restraints. These rapid technological developments pose some interesting sociological questions. For example, how has society changed now that daily newspapers and weekly magazines can be instantly accessed along with other online news and information services? What will be the social impact if traditional publishing companies, books and libraries disappear in the wake of desktop publishing, CD-ROM and online information services? How will television viewing change if networks and cable systems cannot compete with interactive television, computer vision, personalized video and online entertainment options? What are the First Amendment issues related to regulation of the internet and other forms of technomedia? How will we resolve these issues? What are the social implications of online chat rooms and virtual communities? How will they alter our understandings of communication and social interaction? Do the mass media and technomedia provide us with access to too much information? If so, what are the sociological implications of this information overload? On the other hand, do the mass media and technomedia provide too little information as they edit and package news and information into brief capsules? How will interaction over the internet alter the importance of race, age, sex, and social class? Is interaction in cyberspace social interaction? These questions call attention to the need for sociological analysis of the mass media and technomedia. This is true today and will be even more important in the future as we attempt to select, interpret, and understand the media and their impact on society. In each chapter of this book, we take a sociological look at the influence of the traditional mass media and technomedia as they relate to the topic covered in that chapter. This is neither an exercise in the popular sport of media bashing, nor an attempt to promote mass media or technomedia. Rather, it is designed to help you sharpen your sociological imagination and critical thinking skills in order to better decipher, analyze, and understand the countless messages you receive every day, as well as to realize how modern information technologies affect individuals and society. This involves thinking sociologically, looking beneath the surface, questioning the official view, and critically analyzing what is commonly taken for granted activities that have been at the heart of sociology since its inception. The development of sociology. Writings of philosophers, poets, and religious leaders of the ancient civilizations of Babylon, Egypt, India, and other parts of the world reflect substantial interest in interpreting social life. Most of the early writers, however, were less concerned with discovering what society was than with describing what it should be. Although social thinkers had long pondered the influence of society on human behavior, and the tenets of sociology probably have been practiced informally since humans first appeared, the term sociology was not coined, and the formal discipline of sociology did not emerge until the early 19th century. Sociology was born in France, gained impetus in Great Britain and Germany, and eventually made its way to the United States as each of these countries experienced radical changes in social conditions and the intellectual explanations for them. The changing social climate, the Industrial Revolution. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, European society was characterized by a feudal system consisting of wealthy landowners, lords, who owned huge manors, and large numbers of peasants, serfs, who tilled the land and were thus economically tied to the lords and their manors for subsistence. As the lords died, were displaced, or drove one another off their lands, the manors were divided into small farms tilled by their owners and their families, and small villages with an emerging merchant class developed as important economic centers and social communities. One of the driving forces that led to the development of sociology in Europe was the dramatic social upheaval linked to the processes of industrialization, urbanization, and although Martineau introduced sociology to England, it was Herbert Spencer's controversial application of sociology that gained attention and support from wealthy industrialists and government officials in England and throughout Europe. Herbert Spencer, 1902, tearing the negative of what he trade, Spencer developed a theoretical approach to understanding society that relied on evolutionary doctrine. To explain both social structure and social changes, he used an organic analogy that compared society to a living organism made up of interdependent parts, ideas that ultimately contributed to the structural functionalist perspective in sociology. Using the phrase survival of the fittest, even before Charles Darwin's landmark On the Origin of Species, 1859-1964, was published, Spencer's social Darwinism concluded that the evolution of society and the survival of those within it were directly linked to their ability to adapt to changing conditions. According to Spencer, a free and competitive marketplace without governmental interference was essential so that the best and the brightest would succeed and in turn help build a stronger economy and society. Spencer opposed welfare or any other means of helping the weak or the poor, believing such efforts would weaken society in the long term by helping the unfit to survive. These ideas appealed to wealthy industrialists and government officials who used Spencer's theory to scientifically support policies and practices that helped them maintain their wealth, power, and prestige at the expense of those less fortunate. Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883, was trained in history, economics, and philosophy, but his ideas reflect sociological thinking. Observing the same social conditions as Spencer, he drew very different conclusions about their origins. Marx declared that the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and other limited resources in society was not the result of natural laws, but was caused by social forces, specifically the exploitation of one social class by another. He insisted that social structure and the political and economic institutions that people took for granted were not the result of natural evolution or social consensus, but reflected the opposed interests of different social classes. Marx believed society consisted of two basic social classes, the haves and the have-nots. According to Marx's viewpoint, the bourgeoisie, haves, the powerful ruling class, had assumed power not because they were the fittest, but because they owned and controlled the means of production. He believed the bourgeoisie used deception, fraud, and violence to usurp the production of the proletariat, have-nots, or working class, whose labor created most of society's goods, and hence its profits. Marx was not a detached social observer, but an outspoken social critic. He concluded that a slow, natural evolutionary process would not bring about necessary social changes. Rather, his analysis called for a major social revolution in which the proletariat would rise, forcibly overthrow the bourgeoisie, and form a new, classless society. In such a society, Marx wrote, everyone would contribute according to his or her abilities and receive from society based on need. Marx's contributions to sociological understanding provided the foundation for the conflict perspective in sociology, discussed later in this chapter and throughout the book. Marx's focus on social conflict was unsettling to many, especially those whom he described as the bourgeoisie. They were relieved when Emile Durkheim's more palatable social analysis emerged and shifted the focus of sociology back to a more conservative approach called functionalism. Emile Durkheim, 1858 to 1917, unlike Marx, who focused on social conflict, French sociologist Emile Durkheim was primarily concerned with social order. He believed that social solidarity, or the social bonds developed by individuals to their society, create social order. Durkheim believed that social solidarity could be categorized into two types: mechanical solidarity, the type found in simple rural societies based on tradition and unity, and organic solidarity, which was found in urban societies and was based more on a complex division of labor and formal organizations. One of Durkheim's most important contributions to sociology was his study of suicidal 1897-1951, which demonstrated that abstract sociological theories can be applied to a very real social problem. More importantly, it showed that suicide, believed to be a private, individualized, and personal act, can best be explained from a sociological viewpoint. By looking at suicide rates instead of individual suicides, Durkheim linked suicide to social integration, to which individuals feel they are a meaningful part of society. Those with the strongest social bonds are less likely to commit suicide than those who are less meaningfully integrated and have weaker social bonds. For example, his data demonstrated that married people had lower suicide rates than those who were single or divorced. People in the workforce had lower rates than those who were unemployed, and church members had lower rates than non-members. Moreover, those religions that promote the strongest social bonds among their members, e.g. Catholicism and Judaism, had much lower suicide rates than less structured religions, e.g. Protestantism. Today, over a century later, these patterns in suicide and others discerned by Durkheim's early study persist. Max Weber, 1864 and 1920, Max Weber, a contemporary of Durkheim, was concerned that many sociologists, especially his fellow German Karl Marx, allowed their personal values to influence their theories and research. Weber insisted that sociologists should be value-free, analyzing what society is rather than what they think it should be. Weber did not advocate a cold, impersonal approach to sociology, however. He argued that understanding the meaning of social interaction requires Verstehen, an empathetic and introspective analysis of the interaction. In other words, Weber believed that researchers should avoid their personal biases and put themselves in the place of those they study to better understand how they experience the world and society's impact on them. One of Weber's most important contributions to sociology was his concept of the ideal type, a conceptual model or typology constructed from the direct observation of several specific cases and representing the essential qualities found in those cases. By ideal type, Weber was referring to a generalization based on many specific examples, not implying that something was necessarily desirable. For example, Weber used bureaucracy as an ideal type to analyze and explain the increasing rationalization and depersonalization that are part of formal organizations. Weber contended that to maximize efficiency, formal organizations such as private businesses, educational institutions, and governmental agencies had become and would continue to be increasingly bureaucratic. Although Weber contended that bureaucracy as an ideal type represented the most rational and efficient organizational strategy, he also warned of its depersonalizing and dehumanizing aspects. Sociology crosses the Atlantic. As in Europe, the onset of rapid industrialization and urbanization and accompanying social problems gave impetus to the development of sociology in the United States. American sociologists built on and expanded the theories and ideas of the European founders of sociology. Lester F. Ward, 1841 to 1913. Lester Ward is often considered the first systematic American sociologist. He attempted to synthesize the major theoretical ideas of Comte and Spencer and differentiated between what he called pure sociology, the study of society in an effort to understand and explain the natural laws that govern its evolution, and applied sociology, which uses sociological principles, social ideals, and ethical considerations to improve society. The distinctions between these two areas of sociology are still made today. Jane Addams, 1860–1935. Although not a sociologist, Jane Addams practiced applied sociology and put sociological theory to work when she established the famous Hull House in Chicago in 1889 to aid the poor and homeless. One of the founders of American social work, in 1931, Addams's devotion to applied sociology and social activism earned her a Nobel Prize. Margaret Sanger, 1883–1966, another notable social reformer. Margaret Sanger applied sociological theories to problems of population, health, and women's rights. After watching a poor working woman die from a self-induced abortion, she began publishing Woman Rebel, a journal aimed at raising the consciousness of working-class women. Her articles covered topics ranging from personal hygiene, venereal disease, and birth control to social revolution. William E. B. Du Bois, 1868–1963. William E. B. Du Bois earned his doctorate from Harvard and pursued postgraduate study in sociology, history, and economics at the University of Berlin, where he studied under Max Weber. After returning to the United States, Du Bois applied Weber's methodological technique of Verstehen to sociological studies of blacks in the United States. He is considered the founder of Afro-American sociology, Collins and Makowski, 1993. Du Bois was also one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, where he applied his theories, empirical research, and sociological imagination to empower African Americans to achieve social justice and equality in the United States. Contemporary sociology. Sociology came of age in America during the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, a period of radical social change that included the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, and World War II. During that period, some of the most prominent sociologists and social psychologists of the 20th century were either faculty members or students in the first sociology department in the United States, at the University of Chicago. They used Chicago as a dynamic sociological laboratory to observe and analyze the social impact of urbanization and industrialization. The theoretical and methodological contributions of these scholars became known as the Chicago School and provided sociology with symbolic interactionism, one of the three major theoretical perspectives, a viewpoint or particular way of looking at things that dominate sociology today. The other two are structural functionalism and conflict. These three overriding perspectives serve as paradigms, sets of assumptions and ideas that guide research questions, methods of analysis and interpretation, and the development of theory. Let's take a brief look at each and compare their relative strengths and weaknesses. Table 1.3 gives a brief comparison of these three perspectives. The symbolic interactionist perspective. The symbolic interactionist perspective views social meaning as arising through the process of social interaction. Contemporary symbolic interactionism rests on three basic premises. 1. Human beings act toward things based on the meanings that they attach to. 2. These meanings are derived from or arise out of social interaction with others. 3. These meanings may be changed or modified through the processes of interaction and interpretation. Bloomer, 1969, B2. Proponents of this perspective, often referred to as the interactionist perspective, engage in micro-level analysis, which focuses on the day-to-day interactions of individuals and groups in specific social situations. Three major concepts important for understanding this theoretical approach include meaningful symbols, the definition of the situation, and the looking-glass self. In addition, two important types of theoretical analysis fit within the interactionist perspective: dramaturgical analysis and the labeling approach. Meaningful symbols. George H. Mead, 1863–1931, insisted that the ongoing process of social interaction and the creating, defining, and redefining of meaningful symbols makes society possible. Meaningful symbols are sounds, objects, colors, and events that represent something other than themselves and are critical for understanding social interaction. Language is one of the most important and powerful meaningful symbols humans have created because it allows us to communicate through the shared meaning of words. Definition of the situation. Definition of the situation refers to the idea that if people define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. Thomas and Thomas, 1928–572. Simply put, people define social reality through a process of give-and-take interaction. Once a definition is established, it shapes all further interactions. For example, have you ever decided that you were in love with someone? If so, how did that change the way you interacted with that person? Conversely, what happens when a married couple decides they are no longer in love? If they define their marriage as meaningless or decide they have irreconcilable differences, how does that affect their relationship? Is a marriage likely to survive if both partners have defined it as over? The looking-glass self. The looking-glass self refers to the idea that an individual's self-concept is largely a reflection of how he or she is perceived by other members of society. Cooley, 1902–1922. Society is used as a mirror to reflect a feeling of self-pride, self-doubt, self-worth, or self-loathing. These important elements of symbolic interactionism contribute to socialization and the process of becoming human as we establish our personal and social identities. Dramaturgical analysis, a useful theoretical framework within symbolic interactionism. Dramaturgical analysis uses the analogy of the theatre to analyze social behavior. In this approach, people are viewed as actors occupying roles as they play out life's drama. In real life, people do not passively accept others' definitions of the situation nor the social identities assigned to them. Rather, they take an active part in the drama, manipulating the interaction to present themselves in the most positive light. Thus, people often use impression management to communicate favorable impressions of themselves. Goffman, 1959. The labeling approach. Another theoretical viewpoint within symbolic interactionism is the labeling approach, which contends that people attach various labels to certain behaviors, individuals and groups that become part of their social identity and shape others' attitudes about and responses to them. For example, in Outsiders, 1963, Howard Becker explored the fascinating world of jazz musicians and how their non-traditional music, penchant for marijuana, and open racial integration during the 1950s led mainstream Americans to label them deviant. The influence of the Chicago School and symbolic interactionism waned in the late 1950s when a faction of sociologists argued that its approach was too dependent on ethnographic studies, personal observations, interviews, and subjective interpretations. Insisting that sociology must be more scientific, or at least, as Comte had envisioned, more positivistic, this group believed that sociology should rely more heavily on quantifiable data, facts, figures, and statistics. This led to the development of the lower school of symbolic interaction and also fueled a revival of structural functionalism. The lower school of symbolic interaction, Manfred H. Kuhn argued that the theoretical assumptions of symbolic interactionism can be operationalized and applied in more positivistic scientific ways. While sharing the theoretical assumptions of the Chicago School, the Iowa School sought to lend more scientific credibility to symbolic interaction and its research methods. Meanwhile, the desire to make sociology return to its positivistic roots provided the impetus for Talcott Parsons and others at Harvard University to revive the structural functionalist perspective of early European sociologists. The structural functionalist perspective, heavily influenced by the ideas of Comte, Spencer, and Durkheim, the structural functionalist perspective shifted the focus of sociology from the study of day-to-day social interaction to a macro-level analysis which examines broader social structures and society as a whole. This perspective emphasizes social structure and order. Often referred to as the functionalist perspective or functionalism, the structural functionalist perspective views society as a system of interdependent and interrelated parts. Within the overall structure of the system, each part fulfills a specific function, which thereby contributes to the overall functioning of the entire system. The example of a stereo system helps illustrate this view. A stereo system consists of various components: an amplifier, tuner, compact disc player, and speakers. Each component has a specific function to perform so that the overall stereo system can perform its function, the playing of music. If any component fails to function properly, for example, if one of the speakers rattles, the entire system fails to function properly. It is then necessary to isolate and identify the problem, in this case a bad speaker, and repair or replace it. Once the problem with the speaker is fixed, the stereo system resumes its normal functioning. An emergency room in a contemporary hospital serves as a more human example where doctors, nurses, technicians, and other specialists work together as a team, each performing specific tasks in an effort to save a patient's life. Social structure. The structural functionalist perspective contends that society has a structure consisting of a variety of important components. Example, basic social institutions such as the family, religion, education, politics, and the economy. These institutions are interrelated and interdependent. Each performs an important function, contributing to the overall structure of society. A problem in one area creates a problem for the entire system, and for society to function properly, all social institutions must fulfill their basic functions. When all aspects of society are functioning properly, they are in a state of social equilibrium, or balance. In addition to the emphasis on structure, latent functions, and dysfunctions, three basic concepts of the structural functionalist perspective are manifest functions, manifest and latent functions. Contemporary sociologists who use the structural functionalist perspective differentiate between manifest functions, the anticipated or intended consequences of social institutions, and latent functions, the unintended or unrecognized consequences of social institutions. As an example of the two, let's consider higher education. Its obvious manifest function is to transmit knowledge and prepare students for life in a complex industrial society. Higher education also serves a variety of latent functions. For instance, though usually unacknowledged by administrators, faculty, and students, a college campus provides a setting for meeting a potential partner. Dysfunctions. From the functionalist perspective, some aspects of society are viewed as dysfunctional because they threaten to disrupt social stability and order. It is important to note that functional and dysfunctional do not represent value judgments and are not synonymous with good and bad. Crime can be viewed as dysfunctional in that it threatens social order, hurts people, and costs society a lot of money. But functionalists point out that crime is also functional. For example, laws are reinforced when criminals are caught and punished, and crime creates many jobs in law enforcement and related careers. An alternative macro-level analysis of society and human behavior is the conflict perspective. Whereas the structural functionalist perspective focuses on balance, harmony, and cooperation, the conflict perspective sees societal structure as much more diverse and characterized by competition and conflict. The turbulent times of the 1960s and early 1970s revived an interest in the ideas of Karl Marx and gave impetus to the conflict perspective in sociology. The conflict perspective, the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., along with the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, and rising crime and poverty rates in major cities, focused renewed attention on the problems of urban industrial America. The United States was in a state of social upheaval, as were many other countries, and people were seeking answers to sociological questions. Interactionism's emphasis on micro-level issues and functionalism's focus on stability and order seemed inadequate. Problems of racism, poverty, crime, and delinquency threatened the very fabric of society, and their negative consequences were felt around the world. The conflict perspective views society as composed of diverse groups with conflicting values and interests. In any society, these groups have differential access to wealth, power, and prestige. The most important aspects of the conflict perspective are the Marxian approach, which focuses on economic determinism and the importance of social class, and the neo-conflict approach, which focuses on differential power and authority. The Marxian approach to conflict. The theoretical roots of the conflict perspective can be traced to Karl Marx. Often, the values and interests of different groups conflict with one another. According to Marx, these conflicts are determined by economics and are based on social class, and the struggle between the different values and interests of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat is inevitable. When these battles occur, the dominant group attempts to force its values and ideology on less powerful groups. The result is the domination and exploitation of the masses, the proletariat, by the rich and powerful members of society, the bourgeoisie. The conflict perspective is not solely Marxist sociology, however. Today, conflict theorists often take a neo-conflict approach. The neo-conflict approach, social conflict can be viewed as a necessary and even functional social process. From this perspective, conflict necessitates negotiation and compromise, hence it can produce order and a reaffirmation of the social structure. In a diverse nation like the United States, conflict between racial, ethnic, religious, age, gender, and political groups is inevitable but not necessarily destructive. For example, attempts to balance the national budget have typically been thwarted by bickering over what areas of the budget should be increased and which should be cut. Those dependent on Medicare and Social Security resist cuts to those programs and would rather see cuts in, for example, the defense budget or federal aid to tobacco growers. Meanwhile, Pentagon officials and cigarette manufacturers are not about to sit back and allow legislators to balance the budget at their expense. Both sides employ powerful lobbyists to persuade legislators to vote for their respective interests. These political and ideological quarrels are marked by compromises or trade-offs that may not satisfy either group but also do not allow one interest to totally dominate the other. When society is confronted by an external threat, these internal conflicts may decrease, for, as is often said, nothing unites a group like a common enemy. From this perspective, conflict is dysfunctional only if it threatens one or more of society's core values, Koza, 1956. Neo-conflict theorists also contend that class conflict in industrialized countries is not so much a struggle over the means of production, as Marx argued, but rather a result of the unequal distribution of authority, Dahrendorf, 1959. C. Wright Mills and the Power Elite. C. Wright Mills promoted the conflict perspective for analyzing the distribution of power and authority in the United States. In The Power Elite, 1956, he contended that its post-World War II society was dominated by a powerful military, industrial, and political elite that shaped foreign and domestic policy for the benefit of the wealthy and powerful class. His approach focused on historical and structural analyses of class conflict and the uses of ideology for domination. Which perspective is best? Symbolic interactionism, structural functionalism, and the conflict perspective offer very different explanations for society and human behavior. This often prompts students to ask which one is best. However, since each contributes a distinctive interpretation, a more appropriate question might be, how does each theory help us better analyze and understand particular aspects of society or social behavior? By asking this question, we are thinking sociologically and developing our sociological imaginations. To illustrate, let's look at how each of the three major perspectives might analyze the role of the media in society. The functionalist view of the media. From the functionalist perspective, the media perform a host of social functions. First and foremost, the dissemination of information and ideas and the provision of almost instantaneous communication around the globe. This function is heightened during times of crisis, such as war, natural disasters, and social instability. Of course, the media also have dysfunctional consequences, as they may encourage passivity, promote stereotypes, discourage physical activity and critical thinking, and misinform people. Thinking sociologically, how do the media fit into the overall structure of American society? How do the media function to help create a global society? In what ways do the media contribute to social order and stability? In what ways are they dysfunctional? The media and social conflict. From the conflict perspective, the media, especially traditional mass media, are tools of power that help maintain the status quo, cultivate consumers, and disseminate information that serves the vested interests of the wealthy and powerful people and corporations that own or control the media. Sociologists using the conflict perspective point out that despite their egalitarian rhetoric and appeal, the technomedia are disproportionately available to the elite class. What other insights does the conflict perspective offer regarding the media? Do the media help dissolve and blur class distinctions in the United States and around the world? Or do they accentuate these differences? How do the new technomedia reinforce or alter these class differences? The media from an interactionist perspective. Symbolic interactionists point out that the media provide the quickest and most effective methods of defining the situation, to promote commercial products through mass advertising in newspapers, magazines, radio and television commercials, and over the internet. Likewise, politicians stage media events to popularize their agendas and promote their careers, and every major social movement or activist organization has a website. How do the media help shape the definition of a particular social situation? Do the media unduly influence and shape thinking and social behavior? Or do the media merely reflect one version of social reality? None of these analyses is entirely correct nor entirely wrong. They are merely three different theoretical approaches to the same topic. Feminist theory, an example of combining the three perspectives. Quarrels over which theoretical paradigm is best have been non-productive. Increasingly, the three dominant paradigms are being linked, integrated, and synthesized to take sociological theory in new directions. An example of an approach that combines elements of all three of the major perspectives can be found in feminist theory, which studies, analyzes, and explains social phenomena from a gender-focused perspective. This approach, used by both women and men, emphasizes the fundamental importance of gender for understanding society and social relationships. Feminist theories reflect and synthesize much of the rich diversity among other theoretical perspectives in sociology. Chaffetz, 1997, Beasley, 1999, Delamont, 2003. Feminist theory, for example, uses elements of the interactionist perspective to study the ongoing social meanings of gender and to question commonly accepted definitions and symbols of femininity and masculinity. Like functionalists, however, sociologists who use feminist theory also argue that gender is incorporated into the basic social structure of every society. They also study how traditional gender roles and sexism function to maintain the status quo in most societies, yet may be dysfunctional in the way they inhibit some people from achieving their full potential. One of the hottest topics among feminist scholars today focuses on the intersection of race, class, and gender. Feminist theory is most closely aligned with the conflict perspective, however, especially in the way it draws on the historical and contemporary subordination of women and analyzes differential power and authority and the exploitation of one group by another based on gender. Shifting the focus of sociology away from a male-dominated view of the world, feminist theory has emerged as an important theoretical tool for analyzing all aspects of society, but especially in understanding problems of gender inequality, poverty, domestic abuse, pornography, sexual harassment, and violence. Thinking sociologically, taking an integrated approach. Throughout this chapter, we have used the phrase thinking sociologically to describe the type of critical thinking we encourage to understand society and the social world. In our view, this type of thinking can be achieved only by taking an integrated approach to sociology that encompasses all three of the major theoretical perspectives, as well as drawing on theories and ideas from numerous other academic disciplines. All three of the major sociological paradigms are valid ways of analyzing society, and alone or in combination they enhance our sociological imaginations and understanding of human social behavior. And, as feminist theory illustrates, elements of the three approaches can be combined to provide a more eclectic understanding of our social world. Because of different assumptions and approaches, the weaknesses of one perspective are often the strengths of the other two. Also, because of their different approaches to society and human behavior, one perspective may be more helpful than another depending on what you wish to study. Face-to-face interactions of individuals and groups, it has been criticized for somewhere, while the interactionist perspective provides tremendous insight into the day-to-day, ignoring the constraints of the larger social structure in which this interaction occurs. Meanwhile, whereas the structural functionalist approach corrects that deficiency, its focus on structure, stability, harmony, and equilibrium, along with its emphasis on predictability and natural laws that govern society, tends to ignore the importance of diversity and how social variables such as race, ethnicity, and gender may lead to potential tension and conflict among groups. Functionalism also downplays the ability of individual actors to spontaneously create their social realities as they interact with one another. Finally, the conflict perspective emphasizes the struggles for power among various classes and groups of people and helps explain social inequality. Yet it too tends to ignore the importance of day-to-day and face-to-face interaction, especially the individuals as they interact. Given these relative strengths and weaknesses, which theoretical tremendous amount of daily cooperation and harmony among diverse groups and independent perspectives might be most helpful in studying small group dynamics, say the workings of a criminal jury or the president's cabinet? Would that same perspective be as helpful in understanding the breakup of the former Soviet Union or the ethnic cleansing in Bosnia? For the most balanced approach to sociological understanding and to encourage you to think sociologically, we use all three major theoretical approaches throughout this book. Sociology in the 21st century. The new millennium sparked widespread public speculation and some concern as to what the future may hold. Sociology was born during a period of rapid social change associated with industrialization, and historically sociologists have taken the lead in analyzing and interpreting social change and its impact on society. The challenge for sociology in the 21st century is to avoid complacency and to face the challenge of public conservatism on the one hand and the pressures of political correctness on the other. In the 21st century, sociology has been plagued by attacks both from the new know-nothings who resist or outright attack science and scientific findings about human behavior because those findings threaten their religious beliefs or their social status and power, and from the know-it-alls who claim far more for their scientific findings than are warranted by their data, Cura and Paolucci, 2004. Both of these social trends have hampered meaningful research and open discussion of sensitive issues such as racial, ethnic, and gender tensions, as well as serious efforts to study and analyze the powerful influence of mass media and techno-media on society. Avoiding discussion about these sensitive issues supports the status quo, whereas openly talking about them is viewed by some as tantamount to an act of war. Sociologists must use and encourage the critical thinking approach we have described in this first century, Williams 1996, Portes 2000. Chapter to resolve this dilemma if they are to shed light on these issues in the 20. There is much disagreement on the shape of societies of the future, but some common elements run through most futurist literature. Although some futurists are highly pessimistic and others very optimistic, virtually all agree that in the future, sociologists will be studying a vastly different society. That society characterized by enhanced geographic mobility, increased globalization and diversity, more sophisticated technology, and powerful forms of technomedia that link people and places everywhere on Earth will provide new and interesting challenges to sociologists. This will require increased internationalism of sociology and a return to its critical analysis of social institutions and social life, Abbott 2000, Wallerstein 2000. We believe the sociological approach introduced here will be essential for understanding social life in the 21st century. Sociologists are not fortune tellers, but we can construct theoretical models that can be used to plan and shape the societies of tomorrow. For sociology to remain viable, it must demonstrate its utility to society not only in interpreting, but also in changing the world. This also addresses a pragmatic question often posed by students of sociology. Wow, sociology is really interesting, but can I make a living at it? Focus Box 13 focuses on some of the careers pursued by sociologists that involve the practical application of important sociological concepts, theories, and research skills. Sociological models, as opposed to those of futurists, will be guided by a legacy that includes careful observation, critical thinking, and other scientific principles developed over many centuries. Sociologists' goals, however, will continue to be those of sociology's founders, to understand society and to formulate social policies that enhance the quality of human life. While sociology is not about creating utopia, it is interested in what people think that might be, Shostak 2000b. If sociology is to remain on the cutting edge of scientific inquiry, we must continue to challenge the common sense assumptions and taken for granted explanations of the world in which we live. We encourage you to apply critical thinking skills and to use your sociological imagination as you embark on your study of sociology.